make sure that everything is working here. Always just takes like a minute to show up after I click the button.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Just say something real quick so I can make sure that I can hear you on here.
Testing. Can you hear me? Testing, testing. Good.
Yeah, one sec. There's just some delay.
Well, testing.
Okay, nice. And now I'm just gonna
Okay.
screen share on here.
Neat.
Can you see the tab?
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Okay, cool. So we can get started. Chris, thanks for joining us. I don't know if you probably didn't see the title of the stream, but I said something like watching or breaking down film with the best player in the men's division of the past 6 years. Um, Not to put you on the spot, but how factual would you say that statement is?
Um, I don't know if best player was is like how I would define it. I think like something I pride myself on is like my ability to be consistent and like stay at a very high level for a long time. I think throughout like my playing career or over the last 6 years, as you were talking about, there's been like other people with maybe higher peaks in some capacity. So I think like what has made the last like 6, 7 years so something I'm very proud of is like my ability to stay so consistent in the conversation of one of the best players in the men's division.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes I'm curious about the balance of like when you're trying to be really good, like the balance of staying humble but also being extremely cocky about your own abilities. So sometimes I'm curious about like how people view themselves and like that balance, like how how much of your game is like extreme confidence, and then how much is like okay, I still have a lot left to learn.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've talked about this a little before in other avenues, but like I certainly get imposter syndrome and like get anxious before games, during games, like after games. I do think having a certain level of confidence is really important for me in how I play, and I try to like reinforce that internally. So I do think when I'm at my best, I am playing with a lot of confidence. With that said, I do think it's like it is a fine line of understanding like I'm very much a part of like Ultimate is obviously a team sport. Like it is so impacted by how other people play, like how your teammates play with you and like how they can make you better and how you can make them better. Um, so like finding that balance of like when you should be taking up space, when you should try to like win your matchups and be a little more aggressive, versus like letting other people do that, clearing space. And I think that's something I've been lucky to play with a group of very, very talented players that are all on a pretty similar page of being able to be aggressive when it's their time, but also getting out of the way to allow for other people to take that spotlight and perform at a high level when needed. Not sure if that totally answers the question, but
No, yeah,
hopefully
totally.
a little
It
helpful.
sounds like, I mean, despite your nerves, you have a lot of confidence in your own abilities, but also recognition of the talent of your teammates as well, which is pretty similar vibe to when I talked to Will Laurie about Rhino. He was saying that one of the things that really helped him thrive this year was like just trusting in each other. And even though you've got like on their O line, for example, you've got some of the best O line cutters to ever play the sport. But you know, they each individual does not take up too much space, and if they get looked off, they're just going to clear and be ready for the next person to fill that space. And I feel like the Pony O line has been, you know, you've probably had like 4 or 5 of the same players in this stretch of dominance from like 2018 to 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, I think at least maybe like yeah 5. I think like yeah me, Jimmy, Harper,
Sometimes
Sam,
Sam.
Yacht
Yeah.
have all been on the team since. I mean, a couple of them since 2017, and then like Jimmy came in 2018, and we've had other people that were on the team that long, but I think that is like the O line contingent.
Yeah. So it must be awesome to play with the same people for so long and develop such strong relationships on and off the field and build that trust.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely makes it very enjoyable to both like be on a team and play together for that long.
Quick question about your background before we start watching. I You must have played in college because you played on the Next Gen tour, right?
Yeah, I played at George Washington University.
Okay. Did you start before college?
Yeah, I went to Paideia and started. I mean, I played all through high school and played like intramurals in, seventh and eighth grade and learned to throw before that. Like our PE teacher, Michael Baccarini, was also the coach of the high school uh, boys frisbee team, and which was it was a varsity sport at our school, so it was competing for kids playing soccer, basketball, things like that,
Okay.
which I
Yeah.
think is a somewhat unique, and where like I had an advantage of just like learning and playing at a high level for high school for sure, when I was younger, and like playing with some very very good players when I was in high school, like Grant and George Stubbs. Grant Lindsley and George Stubbs were both seniors when I was a freshman and like had played 2 years on chain. So I got some experience pretty early on to like what really high level players looked like even in high school. And they also kind of made the sport look cool to me. And so it helped me want to pursue it in a way that I think is a somewhat unique backstory.
Yeah, totally. I was curious about your background because I don't really like. I guess I didn't really follow Club Ultimate that much in the mid 2010s, but I feel like you were not as much of a household name in the Ultimate community until Pony. Well, you had your championship run in 2018. How long were you playing on Pony before Pony got to be really good?
Yeah. So I didn't, my first club year was 2014. I didn't play club in college at all. And I played on truck. Then I went to Pony in 2015. So I've been on Pony since 2015. And like 2015, Pony didn't make nationals. And then like slow rise up until 2018, obviously. But um, yeah, I think I definitely had a big jump in talent and confidence from like 2015 through 2017.
Mm-hmm. Um, and I imagine that jump was one of the like you were one of the driving forces behind Pony's rise, in addition to gaining other talent like Jimmy Mickle and other players.
For sure. I think I was a stabilizing force in like the 2015 to 2017. Like it was helpful. Um, I think I was, taking it really seriously, was really motivated to try to bring Pony to a higher level and like wanted to live in New York and was very focused on that. And then we got a bunch of people, and we had a bunch of people doing that already. Like it was like Pony had a good infrastructure of people that really cared about it, had like past Callahan winners on the team and things like that, and never broken through. But there was a strong baseline for like caring about it, etc. And then I think 2017 we got like Ben Yacht, Harper, and Sam Little came to New York and all played, and that was when we started to have a group that could really, in my tenure on Pony, really compete at the highest level. I think like 2017 we were really good. We ran into Revolver in quarters and got absolutely obliterated, but
Oh, and you beat
you know, I
Sockeye
think
in pool play. I remember that year now.
yeah, we beat Sockeye in pool play. So like 2017 we were good. Certainly then, so it was like we were building on that in 2018. We added Jimmy and like that, and like Ben Katz and a couple other people. But Jimmy was obviously a pretty impactful addition in 2018.
Yeah. Well, I could just ask you questions about Pony for hours probably, because I'm still really curious about how you built up the team into what it is now. But let's get into watching the film. Um, so basically, I think we can focus mostly on the offensive points for Pony since those are the points that you'll be playing. But I'm definitely curious about some of the defensive things that Pony does, and some of the players you have on defense because really your top 14 are all just like insanely strong. You had how many players did you have on Team USA this year?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it was
It was a
certainly a
lot.
lot. Maybe eight, nine, maybe
Yeah,
10,
yeah.
9 or 10, something like that.
Um, okay, I'm a little curious about this here. So, okay, let's find where you are. So, Pony runs typically your base offense is just vertical in the middle, right?
That's what we've typically done. This game we're doing something a little different. We're like staying inside a little more because we found like teams were pretty good at keying into to vert against us. But we'll still like revert back to vert at different points. But um, it's similar to vert, but like we're trying to stay a little bit more in a side stack in this game.
Mm-hmm. And was that specific against Revolver, or is that something you did throughout nationals?
It was something we were doing throughout nationals. But yeah, it was still like, there were things we would change, tweak depending on the opponents. But offense I think a little different than defense in that you like shift what you do somewhat, but often like you get to dictate where you're going. So there's an advantage in being able to, for the most part, maintain consistency in what you want to try to do,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then adjusting depending on what they do. Yeah,
Because they're on offense, like you're setting the tone, and the defense has to respond to you.
yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious about this moment here. Basically, you're at the front of the stack, and then you're just who is it? Sam, I think, catches the
Yeah,
disc, and then you're drifting pretty far away. It's like you're pushing the stack really far downfield. Um, I'm curious about why you do this because like if you push everyone really far, it seems like the deep shots are going to be less accessible, but you're also making a ton of space in front of the disc, which it seems clear that's a big part of Pony's game plan.
yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what I'm thinking in this point. I think like the short answer is like I'm a cutter on this point, and so like I'm trying to stay out of this, like out of the handler set. And there's like there might be like a little bit of a miscommunication here, to be completely honest, in that we don't give Sam two great options here, where it's like it looks like Jimmy's back in our first dump set, and usually we want to have one like ideal state. Probably I don't go this deep, to be honest, and I'm like, if we're in this side stack, giving like a second option to Sam if Jimmy gets guarded well.
Like
Because
a
like
reset
you're
option.
right. Yeah, like the standard like dump flow, first option doesn't get it. There's some secondary option. Um, and so I think in some capacity, I like am probably just a little out of position here. And I think that's something that we've had a lot of success with on Pony is like we are not perfect in our systems by any means, but we have played together a lot. And when we are successful, we are often doing that because we like can get out of like sticky situations well based on chemistry and like, understanding when to give other people space.
Yeah, totally. One of the big questions I've been asking people this month that I'm very curious about is, are the best offenses in Frisbee more based on systems or instincts? Um, and obviously, it's going to depend a lot from team to team. Sounds like Pony has a general game plan that they're trying to follow, but they are very reliant on instincts and chemistry between each other.
Yeah, and I think it's been different for different iterations of Pony, to be completely honest. Like there are some years we've relied much more heavily on systems, and some years we haven't relied on systems, or they've just been less complex. What I would say is I think it is really important to have an understanding of a system because that allows people to like go off script a little better. If you don't like understand what is supposed to be happening, it is harder to break rules effectively, if that makes sense. So I think like sort of a cop out answer, but I do think it is a combination of those two things where like it is important to have some basis of understanding of what people are going to do going like in the future state of the game, and that allows you to like take chances or maybe go off script a little more effectively.
I just got a comment on YouTube that I am much quieter than you on the audio. Okay, so I'm just gonna adjust the balance here a little bit. Um, can you say something again and
Yes.
we'll
Can
get
you
some?
hear me?
Yeah,
Still too loud? Good.
yeah, I can hear you. Commenters, let us know how this sounds. Um, okay. Anyway, back to the game. So yeah, that's a really interesting answer that you're basically drifting downfield because you're a cutter on this line. Because I noticed you were doing a lot of handling this game. And maybe in a bit when you get back to the handler set, I'll be really curious to hear like more about your evolution as a player and your like how your skill set has evolved.
Yeah, for sure. And like I'm just watching this point and like part of it's like Revolver's doing a pretty good job of like coaching and making us not be able to do exactly what we want to do. And then you can kind of see they go into a little more standard person and we fall into a little more of a vert. So I think like they do a pretty effective job of getting us a little out of our system, and that's where it's like I end up drifting too deep because like maybe someone's I think Jason was guarding me, is fronting me a little bit, and so it's like I'm trying to get out of the space, but it's like sort of what they're looking to do. So there's a little bit of stalling, honestly, we just like have to do, moving it around and then like finding opportunities for one-on-one play.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Um, and yeah, I feel like that's typically the goal of defenses. Like when I talked to Shayla Harris from Fury a couple months ago about the defense that Fury played on Scandal in the final, it was very unconventional defense, but it really just took Scandal out of their rhythm. Um, but the thing about Pony is that when you do that, Pony is so good at Dominator, right? Like it seems like that is a common like built-in part of your offense with either you, Jimmy, Sam, Harper. It's like there are a lot of players on your team who are just super comfortable playing possession-based offense and not really getting psyched out or anything.
yeah, for sure. I do think that is an advantage we often have is like we can cycle pretty smoothly between the handler and cutter layer. And most people, if not everyone on our line, is pretty comfortable, being in somewhat of a dominator set or at least being in the handler set for a couple passes.
Yeah. Um, Revolver's end zone D is pretty interesting. They it's like kind of zony almost. Like they typically have this kind of front wall where people are like really aggressively fronting with big buffers, like we see here, and switching,
Mhm.
like passing players off. Uh, does
Yeah.
does does Pony do things like this with their end zone defense? I feel like I am seeing this type of end zone D become more common instead of just staying tight to your person in these scenarios.
Yeah, I think we're similarly often looking to get into some type of set like this. I think just offensive just players in general have become skilled enough to the point where like, especially in an end zone set, if you're trying to guard one on one, um, it becomes pretty difficult. So I agree. I think most of the teams we played, I would say, have some type of zony-ish, switchy, like end zone
Yeah,
defense they're playing and
like
trying to like force something over the top or cross field just to like reduce, like increase the risk
yeah,
around the end
and
zone.
Jason, you can see Jason like he's just fronting so
Yeah,
hard, not really even guarding um, in the stack. And then
yeah, for
Yacht
sure.
is probably the player who's just going to kind of run around the back of the end zone and look to catch over the tops.
Yeah. I think sometimes teams have success. Like we've had success with this, other teams too. Like if you can effectively switch between like who's handling and who's like this is really effective in my opinion when teams are like, okay, these three people are running the end zone set. These four people are just essentially standing in the end zone and waiting to like opportunistically catch a hammer. Um, these like poachers can really key in on that. I've found that there can be um, like if you switch out opportunistically, like someone from this back set getting into the hammer set, it just creates a pressure point for the defense to have to do some type of switching from the back layer to the front layer. And I think that can be an effective way to
Right.
at
Yeah.
least challenge some of these
Like
poachy
the more
defenses.
switches you can force as offense, the more opportunities the defense has to make a mistake.
Yeah, and like different types of switches rather than just like, okay, I'm standing on this outside, I'm going to switch to this person, then pass him off as he goes to the middle.
Yeah, like more
Just like
dimensions.
making them have to think a little bit. There's more opportunity for mistakes.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a Pony D line point here. Um, I'm curious about Jabron in particular this game. You had him on Adam Reese for the majority of the game. I feel like okay, I have kind of a theory about how Pony uses Jabron, and I feel like I was surprised to see him guarding Adam because I feel like Adam is pretty much Revolver's number one option, and I feel like Jabron doesn't usually take the number one option. So I guess my question is like, how does Pony use Jabron or like other defenders to match up against the top O line?
Yeah, I'm honestly probably not the best person to answer this. As like there's a lot of thought and discussion that goes into our D-line matchups that I'm not always involved in. But I can talk through it a little. I mean, Gibran is one of the best defenders in the world, I think, especially on cutters. Um, and I think it's like we knew Adam is a really effective player for Revolver, and I think we feel very confident in Gibran, like making it really challenging for initiating cutters. We have a bunch of people that can guard top cutters, so you know, there's certain things we think about for specific players, but it's I think it's not always a science exactly on like
Yeah,
who they'll end up on.
yeah. I feel like when I have seen like, especially when Pony has played sockeye in the past, it seems like Jabron always guards the glue guy. Um, like JJ in 2019 or I don't know, whatever 2018 maybe, in 2021 actually, or like
Yeah.
Xander this year, and it seems like you are trying to, or the defensive strategy from Pony is like to really try to erase someone who typically isn't used to being erased, instead of like this game seems a little different because he's guarding Adam, who I think is probably Revolver's most dangerous offensive cutter, or maybe
Mhm.
Simon. I don't know. Um, but then I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. Like
No, I
Adam,
think
Adam's
I understand what you're saying. I
like
think
it's
it's
like you're
like,
trying to create
someone
more of
like
a
Adam is gonna
differential.
get,
Yeah, Adam's
yeah.
gonna do some stuff against even a defender as good as Jabron, like he does here.
Yeah, I think the thought is just like Jabron is one of our top defenders, and like sometimes we're just gonna like I do think if we have feel really good about a matchup that is like where we think there's like we have a significant advantage, um, we can do that. But I just think like we have a luxury to be able to do that sometimes. But in certain games, and I think this is an example of one, like, we
Like
want to have someone like Jabron
yeah, he was the best
on
defender
on
as
Adam,
we
who's
guard
just
us.
like, yeah, just like make it hard, as hard as we can.
Yeah, because like
And I'm not sure, like we often switch matchups throughout the game. So
mhm,
like I'm not honestly aware if we switch him at all or if he guards Adam the whole time, but it's definitely something we'll do is like give people different looks.
yeah. So I think this is a point. Oh yeah, so you're in the handler set here. So is that a common mentality shift for you? Like, okay, at this point you're going to be a cutter almost exclusively, and this point you're going to function like all in the handler set.
I don't think it is something I am really thinking about before a point. I mean, certainly there's like times when we might strategically talk about like, oh, I'm going to be more of a handler versus more of a cutter, but I don't think it's something it's not often something I'm like thinking about before the point. If anything, it's like I might be thinking I want to be more aggressive. And this is I think what's happening here is I'm like I want to be more aggressive and be involved, and they're being very poachy. Like my way to do that is be around the disc a little more and force one-on-one matchups to a certain extent, that sometimes are harder to create in a downfield space. And often it's just like if I end up in a handler set, um, I'll stay there. Like if I don't end up getting one of these uplines, I probably would just stay as a cutter for until we got to end zone and then maybe look to get back into the handler set.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I guess that
But I think
makes
in this point I end up like
you do get a couple up
getting
lines.
a bunch of these uplines. So it allows me to stay in the handler set more so than maybe I would if I didn't or we swung in a different way.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. Like against a poachy defense, you probably like maybe your greatest strength as a player is just you have a great engine, and you're just going to be able to run a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and so against like in a grindy point, you're just going to be able to like you're just going to grind down your defender like you do here against Jason pretty much with just like a lot of cutting and he guards your first two moves on both up line cuts, but then you get him on the third move both times.
Yeah.
Um, have you always been comfortable operating in both the handler and the cutter set, or is that something that you have grown a lot in throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something I've grown in. I do think I've been pretty comfortable in that, playing a little bit of both for most of my career. I just like had the advantage of like playing in high school and getting reps as a handler. I think like often sometimes something that happens is if you're athletic, and you start playing later and people have already learned to throw, like you get pigeonholed into like a cutter role or a defender role or something like that. And I think I had the privilege to start pretty early. So like had a lot of leeway to learn how to throw and make mistakes as a handler and like touch the disc a lot, as a high school and college player. And I think that helped me be comfortable kind of in both layers of offense.
Yeah, that seems like a common theme for a lot of really good players that I talked to. Like they had that opportunity where they were one of the best players on the team early on in their development, and like especially for throwers, they had a lot of room for experimentation.
Yeah,
Which is
for sure.
interesting because when you're a player who's like deciding what team you want to try out for and play for, often players will just say, okay, I want to play for the best team I can. I'll get challenged the most. But maybe sometimes it's better to play for a team that is not as good if you are going to have a role that will help you grow more as a player.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just like a good thing to remember too. Yeah, it's like you grow as a player, but then you might get, like you make a better team and you still have to, like we talk about this a lot on Pony. It's like a lot of people have like a really, BVH used to talk about like the tennis racket. And it's like you can hit a ball on a tennis racket in a lot of different places, thinking about people's, like there's a lot of people on our team that can huck, a lot of people on our team that can throw X break throw, but we want to be playing in everyone's kind of sweet spot. So you have to like give up parts of your game. So I do think there is advantages to playing where you're like the best player, but just also understanding that like you need to be able to adapt and also play not like the best player on a lower level team, if that makes sense. Because I think the way most people play in this game and any high level game at nationals is very different than, like, it is such a team sport. There's very rarely, I think, individuals that are dominating in the way you might see the best player on a college team dominate.
Yeah, maybe one person I can think of is when Rhino's D line got a turn. Dylan just like did a lot of throwing and going.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, for sure. There's certainly room for being able to do that.
but yeah, like that is you're never going to see a successful team based like just off one person's dominance anymore.
Yeah. And I think just being able to play within systems and like make other people better. And then there'll be moments where you need to do that.
Yeah.
And Dylan's
Um,
also like one of the best players. So it's like
Absolutely.
I think there is like um,
And
you know
something he's been
he's
doing
a
his
little
whole
bit of an
career pretty
exception
much.
in some
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
Plus, like D line offense is such a different game than O line offense.
Yeah.
Um, Chris Epps, will I upload this as a video after the live stream? I will on Patreon. And at some point, maybe an edited version on YouTube. Uh, Great D from Conrad there. Just watch that again. Mac with a cool throw, but Conrad reads it really well. I feel
Yeah.
like that's just what he does as a defender. Like he's so good at playing heads up and always being aware of what the thrower wants to do.
Yeah. I mean, Conrad's an amazing defender because he can both like play one-on-one defense incredibly well, but yeah, he's also gonna keep his head up, and especially on long uplines like that. We have a lot of people that'll look for that, and yeah, Conrad is exceptional at it.
Yeah. I guess something I was going to point out here is that the stack is pretty deep, right? The front of the stack is like 20 yards away from the thrower. And as a
Yeah.
result, we just see all the pony defenders fronting pretty aggressively. Like, no one is, even though Leo Gordon is a phenomenal deep thrower, if the stack is that deep, it's pretty clear that the space they're trying to attack is in front of the disc.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like Pony's defensive strategy this year was very aggressively fronting most of the time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, there's certainly some matchup specific stuff that we would think about. But I think we felt really good about the athletes we had on D line that, we wanted to have teams show that they could beat us in that way. And it's like there people are gonna score deep sometimes, but
But
I think
play to the
usually raising
strengths.
the risk thresholds and like, you know, having we have a bunch of guys on our D line that we feel really good about in like a one-on-one deep race.
Yeah,
Not always going to work out for us, but I think we feel good about it throughout the course of the game.
yeah, totally. That hasn't always been the case though for Pony, right? Because in 2018, you're like now your defense seems pretty like a lot closer to the one-on-one end of the spectrum rather than like the revolver machine, very super poachy and switchy end of the
Yeah.
spectrum. But in 2018, like your defense, I mean, you pretty much wrecked Revolver in that final because you were switching a ton, right?
Yeah, I think like our defense in 2018 was definitely more predicated on switching and trying to like take away specific spaces and like being aggressive in how we did that. And yeah, I do think we've moved a little more towards uh person defense. But it like fluctuates for sure and kind of depends on personnel. But I think yeah, the last couple years our personnel has been it's hard to not run person sometimes because we're like we really like every matchup. And I think in some ways it's like it's a to a detriment. I think it would still be it's really valuable to have a different kind of defense that you've worked on a lot to just like throw offenses out of rhythm a little bit.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, should teams be preparing different styles of defense, or is that like going to make them worse at being really, really good at one style of defense? It's like such a tough balance to figure out.
Yeah, I think having an identity as a D line specifically and as a team overall, and sometimes that is defense, but like being able to lean into an identity that you know each team based on their personnel is going to be a little different is really important. And that means having probably a very specific style that you're going to be playing most of the time. But I do think there is value to at least having some one or two other looks, at least in the beginning, or like early, like first half of the field, that you can go to if another team is just like has good matchups or is playing really clean, playing really well, just to like try a different look.
Yeah. Um, so over the course of like the variety of defenses in the past 6 years that Pony has had, has it been mostly based around the strengths of your roster? You feel like this iteration has a bunch of really good athletic one-on-one defenders. In 2018, you had a bunch of really good heads-up players who are good at switching.
Yeah, I think I would say a lot of it is based on personnel and a lot of it's based on like coaching and leadership and like how we want to operate and also based on, the types of players we're playing against. Some of these like truck as they were getting really good and other teams, it's just like there was a lot of handler movement, people really comfortable with the disc. And I think we felt that sometimes it's hard, like if teams are really truly that comfortable, just like throwing it back and forth, sometimes it's hard to play too poachy or zony because you'll end up, having really good throwers kind of be able to work around it without much trouble.
Yeah. So in this moment here, we see another deep stack on the other side from Pony, and the defenders from Revolver are not fronting quite as aggressively, but we do see Adam at the, I think that's Adam, at the front, and knowing Revolver, maybe Adam is just gonna like switch off onto any undercuts that happen. I'm not sure.
And this
Um,
is our D line, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess this is the second time when I've noticed a very deep center stack from Pony. First time being when you were pushing deep. So is this like, uh, like you said, it may have been a positional mistake from you earlier. Would you say that this is also a mistake to be this deep, or is it good because again you're creating a lot of space in front of the disc?
It feels like a little more okay to me. I think Conrad was like kind of pushing into that space. Um, to be completely honest, like I'm not. It looks like we're in a vert stack, which I guess we are, but um, sometimes like we might have been trying to be a little more side, and we just weren't doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think like yeah, it's a fine line. You want to get space in front of the disc and give two options. Um, and some of that comes down to communication. Like Conrad, I think maybe didn't know right away that he was the front of the stack. And then like as he kind of realized like, oh, that's my like kind of my position, he starts moving forward to get in a better position. Um, but really what we're trying to do is just like create open spaces in different areas.
Yeah. Um. Anyway, Pony punches this break in with a huck to Jeff. High percentage play. Let's look at the next Pony D point here. I don't know if I have anything to say about this point. Oh yeah, this is really interesting. So Revolver comes out with a their D line and
Here's Harper, who just wanted to say hi for a second. Speak of the devil. Sorry. Continue.
yeah, this they run a dominator with with their with three of their D line players, and two of these players like Jason and Michael are definitely not handlers. So I thought that was a super interesting move from Revolver. Maybe like even though Jason and Mike don't operate that much in the handler set, maybe they were guessing that they would draw defenders who were not as comfortable operating in the handler set.
Yeah, I
Um,
think there's that. I also think it's just like sometimes you want like Michael is such a good player. It's like
like
you
you're just
want to
gonna let
like
your best player
they were
take
having
over.
trouble scoring, and it's like you want to let Michael, let's see if anyone on Pony can stop Michael going every other for a point.
Yeah,
Um,
which they couldn't at this point.
yeah, exactly. I mean, Dominator is a really hard thing to
Yeah,
stop sometimes, and
yeah.
I think it was a good call by Revolver.
Does Pony ever run that with like Ben and Marquez?
Um, Marquez occasionally will run it for us. Ben, we haven't really done it with a ton. He'd probably love to get involved, but we usually have kept it more to handlers or like like Sam is a great person that runs it a lot.
Right.
It's just like he can run forever and he's a really effective handler.
Yeah. So Revolver runs a ton of FM this game. Something that I've talked about on like every stream that I've done is the effectiveness of this poach from the B when the disc is on the flat side, or the B defender. So Revolver does that like very well. And so you're going to see this defender come out there and shut down that open lane and then force a flat swing instead that doesn't really gain anything. Um, was there anything you did in particular in this game to game plan for Revolver's defense? Because I feel like it is a fairly unique style.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of it was just like making sure we're running through like these poaches can be really effective if you just stop and are like, oh, I'm effectively guarded, I'm gonna stop, and then you're just like clogging. So I think what we were thinking through is like, we may not get our first, second, even third option, but like if we are running hard and forcing them to guard us, like eventually
Eventually, stuff breaks
their
down.
switch is gonna break down, or we're gonna like get past a certain layer of their defense where we're gonna be able to take advantage of
Yeah,
it. Where we run into trouble is if it's like you start going, you stop, no one, we're not decisive, and like that's what poachy defenses can be really effective in doing
and
is getting us into that. So it was more like doubling down on what we wanted to do, and like making sure we didn't fall into that.
yeah, I actually think this works for you here because Scott gets wide open on this under, but Jimmy's just zoomed in on this Ben Katz going deep.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's like that's a look we like. It's obviously it's not executed as well as Jimmy would have liked, but usually we feel pretty good about
you give
Jimmy
Jimmy a lot of
hucking
leeway
for
on
sure.
execution errors, right? Because like just the threat of him hucking is so important for your offense to function.
Yeah, I mean for sure. He's definitely one of the him and Harper. I think have green lights for sure.
Um, so would you say like is that at all like a different game plan than if you're playing against a really tight person team? Because against a tight person team, you also need to run through the disc always. So is there anything that actually changes, or is it like you're saying just like pretty much a reminder? like
Yeah, it's
what's
more,
taking
I
you in
would say it's
edge.
like
Yeah.
more a reminder. I think it's just easier when someone's playing person to be like, I need to run to get open. And like when it's poachy, it's hard because sometimes you're running into a space that it's just like you're not going to get open. Like there's someone standing
Right. You have to
5 yards in
be a
front of
lot more
you, and it's
selfless.
hard to not be like, I'm going to stop or like I'm not going to go deep or I'm not going to whatever. Yeah, exactly. You have to be more selfless because there's more like needing to attack spaces hard, not necessarily to get the disc, but to force the defense to flex so someone else can actually get it.
Um, Here you cut for a reset, and there's some contact there. This was my experience when I played UFA. Like this is what defenders would do. They would get up in your grill, and then I would just kind of like push them off. Not saying that you pushed them off really, but part of the reason
Yeah,
why
no,
I
I mean
became
this
pro here.
this happens. I actually I think I coached the person guarding me at Nutsy, which is kind of
Batstor,
crazy.
I
I
was
think,
I was
yeah,
really
I think I
impressed with
did.
this guy this game.
Yeah, he was great. He was really good. It was fun to play against him. I didn't realize until after the game that he was who I
Yeah,
coached at Nutsy. But yeah, it was cool to see him on Revolver playing in the semis
yeah.
after coaching him at Nutsy. But yeah, I think like I mean that play happens all the time. I think
It's pretty ambiguous.
sometimes it's yeah, and that's I think that's sort of what I was like not like actually mad at him about, but I was sort of like if you're gonna choose to kind of jump in my way, like you got to live with
Yeah.
sometimes there's going to be contact.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the Revolver's handler defenders this game. I feel like, and I mean, when Sockeye played against Revolver this season, I I felt like life was very difficult for me. Um, like they're all dogs. They're just gonna run really hard, but not overcommit stupidly on anything. They typically stay pretty balanced, and like we mentioned earlier, they're very good at flashing the lanes and then recovering and getting tight to their person.
Yeah, for sure. They do a good job of making you think a lot because they're poachy, but being very tight when in certain situations.
Yeah, I think the recovery aspect is something that most people miss about poaching. Um, like poaching, flashing, such a powerful and necessary tool to like take away the defense's first option. But if you take away the defense or the offense's first option, and then you never end up taking away their second and third options as well, then you're not really going to accomplish much because
Yeah,
you
for
never actually
sure.
put any pressure
Yeah.
on. Didn't really notice what happened that point. Just a great throw.
Yeah.
Nice box out there from Dylan. All right, let's take a look at this. O point. Pony almost always starts their pull plays. It'll either be like a straight up side stack with five people or a split stack like 3 and 2. Um, I feel like Pony's pull plays are generally very simple too. Like this person run deep, this person come under. Is that true? Like, do you generally are you trying not to overthink the pull plays and just trying to get some motion?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like getting motion. I think we feel like we can be pretty aggressive out of a bunch of these setups and have like optionality to a certain extent. Where like we'll run one variation of it, and then depending on how it's reacted, like we have other variations of it. There's also some flexibility with like utters to audible kind of what's happening. So like I think that's something we think about. It's just like teams are really good at stopping pull plays. So it's like often
Yeah,
you're I mean like yeah, if it seems like tight person on a side stack, like
yeah.
we feel pretty good, but
Calling
often it's like there's gonna be switching. So a lot of it is like let's get some movement that can be really aggressive and have some optionality in it based on how people are playing it.
when I was calling pull plays for Sockeye this year, sometimes it was just like we're just running to run here because like there's always good when I have the disc in the middle. There's always going to be a double sag in the lane, and it's like it seemed pretty rare, kind of, that I was able to hit someone downfield and generate momentum. So I guess
Yeah.
that's something that I'll definitely be thinking about. Like, how do we anticipate the sag better and then call pull plays to punish that? And there is a really
Yeah.
interesting play that Pony runs later in this game. It actually might have just been improvisation, but you get a huck to Ben, like off the first or
Yeah.
second throw or something. Oh yeah, I wanted to freeze it right here and just point out, like, this is what you're going to see a lot from Revolver's defense. Like, the farther away the offensive player is from the disc, the bigger the D gap will be, and they're just really going to concentrate themselves a lot in this space in front of the disc.
Yeah.
Would you say
I mean, they
that's
almost get a block here. This
yeah,
is like, I mean, it's
yeah,
definitely effective. And like they have a lot of time to recover usually.
uh huh,
I mean, like someone like Jimmy or Harper can like
yeah, it's very player
sometimes
dependent.
hurt that where it's like you can hit like a hammer across and then it's like they're in a
Yeah,
bad position.
I feel
Um,
like I feel like Yacht can punish this stuff with his throws, but I never see him actually do it in game. And so teams treat him as if he's not really a thrower, and he can definitely huck it, but I rarely see him like solve some kind of complicated defensive problem with like an inside break or an over the top or something.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just like we feel really good about maintaining possession with easy throws for the most part. That and like turnovers are such at this level are so important
Yeah.
that it's like it has to be such a sure thing
Hmm.
to really make those choices.
Oh, let's point out this cut from Scott here. So I think Revolver's going to try to switch. So look at this. The defender who was on Scott. Actually, let's rewind that 1 second. This is just a really good switch punish. So I think that's Kyle Louis on Scott. He tries to pass Scott off to the player who's deeper, right? Makes sense. Scott sees that. He sees the under defender left him, and only the deep defender is left, and then he just catches a huge under basically for free there.
Yeah, I think that is like the way the one of the most effective ways for us to punish poaching is during that switch, you know, you're being backed, especially if the under person then looks away. It's like usually you have, or
Yeah,
it's like you even just horizontal cut to the sideline. Often there's like a soft spot in that like side stack setup.
yeah,
Um, if the defenders are not really paying attention.
yeah. And then he flips it to you for the up line here. I'm curious, when you're kind of either in the cutter set or the handler set, would you say that you have like moves, like jukes, or is it mostly just running really hard in a straight line and then changing direction
Um,
once or twice?
yeah, I think like I think of it as like, or something I will think about is there's obviously like the upline space and the backline space or like backfield space. Something I've found to be really effective for me as a dump cutter is to like also start to think about like the inside shoulder or the outside shoulder of the defender. So it's like still the upline space, but it's like this is sort of like a deeper upline cut to like the outside shoulder versus like the inside. And so a lot of times I will play around with like
So the outside
baking to
shoulder,
both of those.
would you say
Yeah, it's
is
like right
outside
now
shoulder
I'm
also the right
attacking the
shoulder?
outside shoulder. Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Then when I say outside, that's what I'm talking about.
okay,
And so sometimes I will, you know, maintain this line, but sometimes what I'll try to do is like drive here and then swim move in front of that shoulder
yeah,
or vice versa. Like try to fake the up line, have them aggressively try to get in my way and then go to the outside.
hmm,
And just like trying to create a little more optionality for myself in that cut.
yeah. Often when I see a defender just face guarding like this, I'll just blast up line if I don't see any poaches in that area, and then like a space pass like this can be really effective because if the defender doesn't see it go up, then they don't really have a shot at it.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, in that moment, like I'm pretty sure I'm sort of just clearing there.
Yeah,
Like I'm kind of like Jason played a good D. Like I didn't get exactly what I wanted. And Scott just throws a really good throw.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. A little barbecue backhand too.
yeah.
All right, let's see what happens here. Oh, also, do you have like a hard cap for a time when you have to leave today?
No,
Okay,
like
cool.
no haircut.
Okay, here's another point. I don't think I have really much to say about this point, so let's just fast forward. We have another huck. Oh yeah, this is funny. Not really, definitely not the execution that Revolver wanted here. Like
Yeah.
Calvin started in such a good position, but then ends up overrunning it, which is
Yeah,
always a terrible feeling as a defender.
for sure. Always brutal.
Yeah. And then I think Revolver is able to work it in here. Yeah. Okay, let's check out the next pony O point. Another, okay, so this one is just side stack, and Revolver's going to guard it. So they guard the first motion very well, but they don't take away, like, they kind of like overplay it a little bit, right? Because they've got this wall of defenders that's really hard to break through, and that's why Yacht is just ready for this over the top from Jimmy. But I get the weakness is like one quick swing and then a down the line pass, and there aren't any defenders on that side of the field.
Yeah, and that's just like they sort of blow a switch a little bit.
Yeah.
Like they have like three people guarding like kind of the same space, and that's sort of what we like. They overload one side. Like often we'll try to go to the other side and see if they can effectively maintain that spacing. And sometimes they can, but sometimes we end up with a good chunk of yards, and they're scrambling a little bit. They actually do a pretty good job of recovering here, I think.
Yeah, they do. The handler defense they play after this, I really want to point out. So pony looks reset. There's one handler cut, mostly just a clear. Batsdorf stays really balanced on Jimmy. I like how Dan, number 7 here, like he's in the lane here just for a second, and then when you look at the reset, then he's getting tight but not over committing. He's decelerating and staying balanced there, but you just bail out the offense with a really good break throw.
Yeah, I mean they're playing good D, and that's like sort of what our looks are, right? It's like and I probably could have hit cats there, but yeah, it's like they're playing good D, and like they don't let anyone return or get like you said, there's not like over committing and then getting beat to the other side.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, you probably could have thrown it to Ben, like around here, I think, but you'd probably be losing some yards, like negative momentum, and the Marcus.
It's also tight with Jimmy's
like
defender. Yeah.
So
it's a tight spot.
Yeah, like Dan does a good job of just closing the gap and being close enough to just discourage the throw, which is enough.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, great break there. And then again, like Revolver really making you work for resets. But I feel like you are just way less affected. Like there's way less mental toll on you, or physical toll, I don't know, both, from having to make multiple moves to get the disc. And it seems like you don't get worn down as much as other players would from having that effect.
I do think it is definitely something like we are comfortable with. Like 2018 especially was like a lot of not easy dump cuts. So it's definitely something we're comfortable with. And like, it's also something like we deal with really good defenders in practice. And so you get comfortable being like, all right, they stopped option A and option B. Like, let's see if we can just sort of figure it out.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to ask. Like flat side resets are becoming so important in Ultimate, I think, like more and more important as FM gets more and more popular. And I was curious what Pony's priorities are when cutting for a flat side reset. Like during the summer, for a while I was kind of like, okay, let's just reset the disc. And when I was cutting on sockeye, I would tend to get the disc like right behind the player, and then we'd go for a give and go. But sometimes the give and go wouldn't happen. Then we were like, okay, this isn't really leading to good results, so we're going to be more aggressive with trying to swing it farther off the sideline instead. So like, does Pony, like I know Pony's very content to just grind things out. So do you sometimes go for this cut like straight behind the disc, or are you also looking to swing it and gain more horizontal yards?
Yeah, I think it like we will go behind the disc. I think to your point, like teams have gotten really good at switching that and not letting you get off the sideline as easily on the give go. So I do think it is lower on our options. Like ideally, we want to get moving across the field or gain some yards upline in kind of like the upline space. And I think sometimes, like especially if you position well in the front of the stack, it is hard as the market is hard to stop that inside, and as the defender on the front of the stack, it is hard to defend both that and like a backfield
Yeah, you
cut.
really have to
So
make a
usually
choice.
you can get if you're a little more aggressive, but a lot of offenses, and like we do this all the time, are really content to just go right behind the disc. But to your point, I do think not settling for that is really valuable.
Yeah. Does Pony run a lot of FM on defense? I feel like I haven't seen it too much.
I shows how like separate our O&D lines are. I like I we have certainly run it a bunch in the past on our D lines. Um, I don't totally remember what our like. I mean, we definitely run it. I don't remember like how frequently we were running it in this game specifically,
Hmm.
or even at national specifically. But I do think it is a really effective defense.
Um, yeah, coaching high school this year, I've definitely had my teams do it a ton more. I feel
Yeah,
like it's even more effective at the youth level when teams are just not ready for marks to try to challenge basically everything.
yeah, for sure.
All right, I think we're about to see an absurd throw from Mac here in a second. So yeah, Mac catches. So Mac as a player is very comfortable just resetting behind the disc because the offense gets such a big benefit with him having it compared to most
Yeah,
players. Um, for reasons like this, like he just throws this
yeah. I mean, it's
down
a
the line, same.
really hard
Yeah.
throw.
All right, let's
I
check
mean,
if
that is
that is impressive.
for sure.
Okay, I'm a little. So this is probably the most like host stack I have seen Pony's formation look right here. We see a poach from Kevin. I'll point that out. Kevin yellow visor right here.
Hmm.
He's gonna poach on Scott, and then I think Jimmy just like misses him there because there was
Yeah,
an
Jimmy's just
opportunity.
probably looking at the end zone. I mean, it's
Yeah.
we'll take it. He hits it enough that
Yeah.
it's fine. But yeah, I think ideally he probably hits him there.
Um, Pony is really comfortable hitting these skinny inside breaks, but also that's
Yeah,
a crazy throw.
I mean that throw by Jimmy is
Yeah.
not a lot of people are making that throw. I mean, like it's not like that great, but it's just like it's a pretty tight window.
Yeah.
But that is like a very high percentage throw from
Yeah.
Jimmy
And
for
like,
him.
yeah. Like even if there's space, I think most people just don't have the confidence to throw
Yeah,
that, even if there weren't a defender there.
yeah, definitely.
Although, as we compliment Jimmy, that's a really good hand block from
Yeah, I
Sawyer.
mean that's a good
So
device
Sawyer is
here.
probably one of the best Jimmy defenders that you could ask for, I would imagine.
Yeah, I thought for sure Jimmy had gotten fouled there. It's just like so rare, I feel like, to get the hand block on like a backhand.
Yeah,
It's just like your hand is there, but
yeah,
yeah, you got, I mean, that's a really good D.
yeah. Um, Ponies O line D here. Okay, so you go for this flash. Um, I often say that people shouldn't flash from the one because their guy is too accessible. Here they do throw it to Mike. Would you say like, do you often go for that flash off the front of the stack? Like in retrospect, Do you still think this is a
Yeah,
good move to
I think
just?
it's probably a mistake. Like I think like Mott is playing good D. I agree. Like I think like leaving Michael free at the front of the stack to like get him a free swing is definitely not what we want.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think I'm trying to think if I think usually I do not want to flash from the front. Like certainly sometimes I'll do it. But I agree. I think leaving the front of the stack, like if I'm the front of the stack and someone flashes off me, I it's great for me. Like
Yeah.
like just getting a free couple yards and like the disc back towards the middle of the field is super advantageous. I mean, you can see they take it's it's a big advantage for them.
Yeah. Would you say that Pony's O line defense has a different identity than your D line defense?
Yes, I do think that. I think part of sometimes I don't know we fluctuate between having an identity and not having an identity, I would say. Um, we've
Do you think you need an identity?
sometimes can be very good. I do think it helps on I mean, like I think it's something we've struggled with a little bit in the last couple of years is like we have to be so clean um in order to win these games. And like 2018, I don't think we really needed to be as clean.
Yeah.
Like we were just we felt more confident getting it back. Part of that's just like the skill level of D line players has gone up a ton in the last like 7, 8 years, I think. So just like D lines are convert like we used to just be able to like sit a poach in the lane and like have a deep help and D line offenses really would struggle. And
Yeah.
now it's
Yeah, I would
there's
agree with that.
really really good offensive players on D lines.
Sometimes I
I
feel like
think
the
if you
D
look at
linos are stronger than the O linos.
for sure, and it's like a different kind of thing. They're playing against different defense. Like um, it's hard to get it back. But yeah, I think that's something, we always we like played around with a bunch of different defenses, poaching, playing tight, um, brunching. It's always I mean, you saw it like when we were in the finals against Rhino, we couldn't get the disc back. Like obviously that's like their D line offense is awesome, but
Yeah.
you know, there's something to be said about our O line's defense
Yeah. Sometimes they're
in a
just on
situation like
fire,
that.
so
For sure. I mean, like it's not certainly they were playing really well,
yeah.
but I think that is something we've struggled with is like we have to be really clean in a way that can be a little unsustainable at times. I mean,
Uh-huh.
at nationals we've been pretty effective, but it's yeah, it can be hard.
Yeah. With sockeye too, I like something I'm thinking about for next year is like, okay, maybe we need someone on the O line who, like not for their offense, but more for their defense. So we can get the disc back in those instances.
Yeah, I mean for sure. And then similar, yeah, I mean, and similar is like you want
You want offensive
defensive
players
players
for your
that are
team.
really good
Yeah.
offense. Yeah, if you look at like the past, you know, however many winners of nationals, they always have like D line players that can really like, you know, quarterback a D line's O in a way.
Yeah. The line building is such an interesting puzzle. The
Yeah.
ultimate. I really like this flash from Kyle on Ben. He takes away. He pushed the disc farther to the sideline. Ends up being a more challenging place to huck from. It almost looks like the mark got a piece of that. I don't
I
think.
think the mark did. I think the
Okay,
mark did. I can't
it
totally
could be.
remember,
That huck
but
was oddly short.
I think it got slowed down.
Yeah. Um, Foul discussion overruled
Hey,
there.
can we watch this? I'm
Oh
honestly
yeah.
curious. Can we watch that foul call?
Yeah. Okay, let's see this
I just don't
slow mo
remember.
here. So watching it, I watched this like a couple hours ago, and Mike's hand
Did they
was
do another
definitely
slow?
Mike's hand was definitely doing something suspicious here. Like looking at this angle, I can see why Ben calls the foul because he touches the disc. If he's thrown off by
Yeah.
Mike's hand on his back,
And he's like, it's pushed under.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah. I
looking
mean,
at it in live action, it looks like a soft call, but then you see the replay and you can understand why he's
yeah, especially when you're moving that quickly, it's like even the smallest like kind of push.
yeah.
I mean, it's tough. I do not think it is a bad call by Ben to make.
It's hard.
People were upset about this call, which I thought was a little ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
But I can also see why it looks a little soft, but I do think that, can impact. But also
Yeah,
I can see why Michael's like, I didn't touch you.
and
Because like
it's
when
just
you're
hard to
running, it's
tell
like this
how
thing.
much you're actually exerting with that
Yeah.
with that hand.
I felt like it was a fine call, fine, go to the observer.
Yeah,
I think it's reasonable for the observer to have said no foul, but
yeah, totally.
I do understand that call.
Ben is about to get a great layout to here.
Yeah, this really fired us up.
Yeah, sick. You don't see this too often from Ben anymore.
Yeah, I mean he is he is a really effective defender, especially when he gets a little pissed off.
Uh huh.
He like I've seen him do this type of thing a bunch. But yeah, this was sweet. And it's like this is the type of like it can be so motivating
Totally.
for
Yeah.
our D line and our O line to be like, okay, we're in it. Like it's a big swing. It's also like a big emotional boost.
Yeah. Um. So here we talked a bit about end zone junk already. Like here, it's even more exaggerated from Revolver than before. I think like they have, I can't tell exactly. I think it's Jacob Smith maybe, just totally like he's not guarding anyone. Well, he is
Yeah.
guarding. They're double teaming the first cutter. Um, let's see how this plays out. Like he's still. I feel like now maybe he needs to find a different spot. But he's still just staying in that area in front of the disc. Like I'm a little surprised that Harper isn't looking at Scott or Marquez a little. I don't know. He's like I guess like you were saying, turnovers are so punishing that you just really want to be safe with it.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I think it's like yeah, I think it's like being safe with it.
And when you're right next to the
It's
end
like
zone,
kind of some tight windows. Like
yeah,
Michael's like sort of back there.
it
It's
would be an easy throw to mess up.
it's not easy. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like knowing that Revolver can get away with this to an extent, like makes me think like maybe end zone defense should always be like this. But it's also very
Yeah.
dependent on the player with the disc too.
Yeah. And there's
So
certain players on certain teams that are going to really punish.
yeah,
Like I think Jimmy is someone that is
Jimmy
really
or
exceptional
Mac,
as that.
yeah,
Like when he's in this end zone set, like he is really aggressive looking over the top.
yeah. That looks like a goal, but maybe your heel was on the line. So again, you're gonna
Yeah,
need
I thought it
to.
was a goal too, but yeah, they didn't call me out.
Yeah, you gotta play more mini in Seattle.
Yeah, yeah.
So looking at the defense now, again, 5 players pretty close to the disc here, and the strength of that
Yeah,
is
it
it makes
is.
it so hard for Jr. to get open. Like if this is a one-on-one with Jr., he catches this at the cone every single time. It's like so
Yeah,
hard to
for
stop him
for
in
sure.
particular. But when he's cutting against 2 people, so of course you try to move the disc laterally, and eventually that does open up. So I guess I'm curious. Like, is this a defensive win for Revolver? I feel like it's pretty solid. Like, this is a pretty good possession from the standpoint of Revolver because the disc started on the very goal line, um, and Revolver was able to force a lot of passes.
Yeah, I think it's like fine. I'm sure they would want that throw from Sam to Marquez to be a little more challenging.
Yeah,
I think like they kind of got what they wanted, and then that to me feels like a little bit of a blown coverage. Like
yeah,
they usually that throw is just like very open.
yeah. Looks like
Whereas like if
blanket
they have
almost.
someone like running at Marquez, it feels like that would be more of a win. But yeah, I mean certainly a win not to give up
Yeah,
a one throw goal. But like to me, like that's like a little too easy.
definitely.
Um, but we had to. It's not our first option,
Yeah.
and I think usually it is a win if it's like an over the top throw to the back of the end zone
Mm-hmm.
is a little higher risk for sure.
Comment on the chat for D-Lino, Edmonds and Merriman really helped Truck 2 years ago on D-Lino. Absolutely. And they did again this year. I'll tell you that. Truck is one of those teams when Sockeye played them in the pre-quarters, I felt like their D-Lino was very good. Like
Yeah,
they had
for
a
sure.
good combination of athletes. That kid Miles Grovich, incredible deep threat, but they were also able to play small ball really well.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, do think the second half goes. I remember there being some quicker points than in the first half. Let's see what we got here. Okay, just a really nice throw. Leo Gordon, he played pretty well this game besides just one missed hook.
Yeah, and like I don't even like Gibbs kind of gets beat deep there, but I think this is sort of more on
Yeah, I
JR.
mean his break side
Like
is
I
pretty
think
good.
Gibbs is kind of where he wants to be. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not
And
sure
it's
how
like,
Jabron could play this any better than he is in this
yeah,
spot, besides maybe
and
just
it's
being
just like
humble.
it's a good throw.
It's a really good throw.
But yeah, definitely a little easier than we want it to be
Oh,
for them.
yeah, this might have been. I think this was an FM point for Pony.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I feel like playing FM, marks need to be so aware about if the thrower is throwing a forehand or a backhand, because like forehands
yeah,
just come out so much quicker.
yeah,
Like if the force is if this is on the other side of the field, you don't really need to worry that much about the around backhand hook. Um, but with the around forehand hook, it's like I like this is a it's not an easy throw for everyone, but I think it's an easy throw for Leo Gordon.
and it is like it's hard. It's just like a lot of leverage. I think it was JR marking him, but it's just like it's hard to be a mark in that spot. It's
Yeah,
just like he's at a good distance. Like there's a lot of movement. It's kind of like you're giving up one of the inside of the round in some ways.
yeah. So here we see a classic pony pull play, which is one guy goes deep and one guy comes under, and this is just like you basically like I like what you do. You just run really hard here, and Mike is
Yeah,
initially in good position to defend this, but because you just run hard and like you're saying commit to the cut and you don't just stop because a defender's in front of you, then you get the disc. Don't get to continue downfield, but like your offense is in a good spot now.
yeah,
And
for sure.
now we see more of that side stack that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
Um, Pony is very comfortable hitting this throw off the trap sideline where you lose, I don't know, 5 to 8 yards, but maintain possession of the disc.
yeah, for sure.
Like it seems like your priority in that situation is really just like get the disc in the middle. You have way more options there. Even if you lose some yards, make the next throw a little bit harder. The next throw is probably not going to be a turnover.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Sorry, my headphones just died.
Oh, you're good.
Um, I should be fine. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
One second. Okay. Cool. You can still hear me?
Yeah. Can you
Cool.
hear me?
Sorry about that. Yeah, yeah.
Great. No problem. Um, all right. We got Pony D point here. Don't really remember what happens here. So this is something like this is definitely a difference. I think Pony's defense in general is just much tighter than Revolver's defense in certain situations. Like, I don't remember who number 7 is. That's Clark.
That's Clark. Clark Kofor. Yeah.
Like, I think the Revolver defenders would have a much bigger D gap in this scenario because they care a lot more about the space in front of the disc. The Pony defenders seem to want to be more physical early on. Like earlier on into the cuts or just stay tighter throughout the entire process. But in this case, like Byron is able to get more momentum into his cut.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
Clark turns his hips. Oh yeah, this is a pretty sick throw and catch here. Vintage Revolver, Byron to Simon.
Yeah.
So again, like, let's look at what happens when the disc swings here. So the disc is in the middle. Look at where these defenders are. And then the disc swings, and like Jason and Dan are immediately just going in front of the disc, which I think is really interesting. And then Jason is like, it's almost like zone.
Yeah,
He's not guarding
for
a
sure.
person. He's just standing in this area in front of the disc, and then the other Mike just like instinctively switches. I didn't see Jason even point or anything. Like they just know to do that,
Yeah.
which is cool.
Yeah, I mean they run this defense really well. Definitely give us trouble.
Yeah, but Pony just stays patient, moves the disc side to side, um, and then it gets a really good hook look to Marquez.
Harper's throw there is kind of gets us out of a jam.
Yeah, but like he didn't really have to do anything crazy. I mean, he did throw this kind of off balance, but he caught an under and then threw a hook,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
it's definitely
It's
well within Harper's
definitely in
wheelhouse.
the system.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, this point is pretty short. I think huge throw from Mac. Mac known for his flick hooks more, but he's definitely got a big backhand as well.
Yeah, yeah, this is a really good throw. It's
You and
it
Mac
is
played
hard to
together on the Team USA O line, right?
Yes, yeah,
Is that fun just playing with someone who can just hit you at pretty much any spot on the field? I guess you have that with
yeah,
Jimmy too. So
yeah.
you're
I
used
mean,
to it.
Jimmy is similar. Yeah, I mean, Mac was great to play with, and it was like fun to you know um, learn from Mac and like how he thinks about offense too. And like I think we have very different skill sets in some capacity. Like he's a much more aggressive thrower than I've ever been, and it is like it's really fun talking. It's just like fun talking to someone like that about like how they're looking at the field, like where are there spots that like they want you to drift to, and like what are their progressions going to be, and like someone with that wide of an array of throws like really gives you a lot of options as a cutter.
Yeah, totally. What I want to point out here is just the amount of space that's in front of the disc. Like it seems like this is such a large theme with basically any good team that I watch. Like teams that are good at just churning with cutters, it's always because they have a huge amount of space in front of the disc, and this is set up. I'm always a big fan of this deep cut down the line, especially on the flat side. Um, so like Chris sees the disc swing and he's like, okay, I'm gonna let someone else attack the space in front of the disc, and I can just go deep. And this is a cut that, you know, JR probably isn't gonna throw this, but it has to be respected by that defender. They can't just leave you there. And then
Yeah,
you get Yacht attacking.
and for sure. And another thing about that, like you clear the front of the space, and like it's just like if JR doesn't hit, yeah, I mean, like this is a really hard position to guard, right? Like Yacht has a ton of space,
Mm-hmm.
and also it's like I can keep my eyes up, and maybe when Yacht gets it, I can button hook, or if we swing, I can like go to the other side. So if my defender doesn't respect it at all, like me releasing there is still going to be
Yeah.
really effective
Or maybe
late.
they respect it too much, and then you can just come back under
Yeah,
behind
for
the
sure.
mark, and JR can break the mark.
Yeah.
So lots of options there from that cut. See what happens next. So that's another example of the IO break that Scott just threw that I feel like Pony is just really comfortable throwing with all their players.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like barely a break. Like
Yeah,
that spacing from
yeah,
Sam is really good. And it's like Scott throws like a flat throw, and then Sam gets all this
yeah.
momentum going to the break
And it's
side.
a cut I see a lot from handlers. Like
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
Sam does that a lot. I feel like you do that a lot. Like again, right here. Basically, the handlers are attacking the space behind the mark because it's really hard for their defenders to guard.
Definitely.
Pony D point. Don't think I have too much to say about this one. Oh, this is, I think, Leo's laser beam huck. Easy Antoine D. Let's fast forward through the injury. That was pretty bad. play. um, so like even Pony's D line is really comfortable playing small ball,
Yeah,
which is cool.
for
Like,
sure. I mean, it's like right now on this line
although you do have
specifically too. We have
Sam out there.
Jr. Sam and Calvin.
Oh, although
We turn it over immediately, but
yeah,
it is a line we like.
yeah. Um, Revolver is able to punch it in here. So we see. Oh, this is a pull play that or like a pull play formation that I often use with the high school teams, kind of like an L shape, with like a kind of vert stack on the side with 3 people and then a couple people out here in the lane. I feel like you've got a lot of options here, because you and Scott both have a ton of space to work with, and if both of you clear out, then Ben has a lot of space to work with, and so I think it's a cool formation, and only having one reset means there's only going to be one sag out in the lane.
Yeah, we set up in that a decent amount.
Yeah.
Similar reasons, just like there's a lot of flexibility on what you can do.
And I like what Harper does here. He just goes deep and then forces a switch. And then, I mean, technically they stop the pull play, but basically you just got a big under out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like what Harper does there is really effective because it's just like someone's expecting just guard a handler and like can just sag, but then it forces like some sort of recognition and switch, or you're letting someone wide open.
Harper is low key a great deep threat for Pony.
Yeah, he does. He scores deep a lot for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice D from Dan there. Yeah, this isn't. I feel like this is something you rarely see Scott throw.
Yeah, I think we were surprised. I think he just didn't see the puck. I mean, it was a good look. It's just
but this is kind of what Revolver wants from their defense, right? Because all the weak side defenders will be looking in the middle of the field for that type of throw.
Yeah, definitely.
And then let's see if Revolver runs the same type of kind of small ball. So yeah, it looks like they're pretty comfortable just working it here. And then in a second, we're gonna see Sam calls for a switch. You don't switch. Ends up being fine. What's So do you think that's related to like Pony's kind of lack of O-line defensive identity? Like, did it feel like you were not always on the same page about switching?
I think there it's just like we have some situations where we always switch, and some situations where we don't. And I think, let me just see what happens. Because, I think we're in force middle. Yeah, I mean, I think I should have switched there. Because Sam has to come a long way to get around to the mark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that's like, not having as many reps playing defense. Some of it's just like there's going to be some miscommunications. I do think we probably wanted to switch there.
Anyway, Revolver continues to work pretty well. I will say the Pony O-line looks pretty tired right now.
Yeah, I mean it's an issue we've had.
After a point like that, that's pretty grindy. What do you think the sub-calling mentality is for the next point? Are you bringing players over from D-line?
I think we had a pretty big O-line.
Mm-hmm.
We had a pretty big O-line this year, so bigger than years past. So I think what we do is just everyone that was not on comes on, and that's
JR,
usually like
Ben.
3-ish players. And then we'll like bring JR over.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a communication thing, like depending on how people are feeling.
Yeah.
They'll sub out. Sometimes we'll call timeout.
Another split stack play. Like the split stack plays are so cool because there is a ton of space in the middle, so you don't know if Pony is looking to attack the middle of the field or it's just a fake like it was there, and then Marquez
Yeah,
just comes back.
for sure. I mean, yeah, it allows you to do a lot of different things, and like one version will attack one space and one will attack another. So usually you can find something.
Yeah, here is a classic JR cut, the unguardable JR cut. Little stutter step, or like he takes one jab step deep and then comes
Yeah.
under for the up line. Um, I think there will be another time, maybe a better example, where I'm going to ask you how you guard that cut because I want to know for my own selfish reasons.
Yeah.
Um, at a time like this, when there's a lot of pressure and like your O line messes up, like gets broken, do you have any specific mental tactics that you use to stay composed, or is it just like thinking about your teammates, thinking about all the work you put in? There's not doing anything special. It's just like
Yeah, I think it's like for me, it's like trying to just stay in the moment, like, you know, feeling just like, yeah, trying to like be in those moments rather than like thinking about like what ifs or like, what if we mess up? What if we do this, blah, blah, blah. Just like trying to center myself or ground myself in like that specific moment, and not overthink. Um, yeah, usually if I'm not thinking, I'm doing pretty well. It's hard to not think in those situations for sure. But
yeah. Have you read the Inner Game of Tennis?
I think I did honestly a long time ago. I read a lot of things that have touched on very similar
Yeah.
concepts.
See, I think that's a pretty common theme in
Yeah,
sports. Like thinking is bad.
yeah, for sure.
Here's a D line clip that I want to highlight. Conrad plays amazing D here.
Yeah,
By
he goes
himself, he is
into
able to guard two players and force a
yeah,
turn, and he's able to do without even looking at the disc. Like that's
yeah,
that's that's absurd. Mac, I mean, this other guy looks wide open, and Conrad's able to do this because he just moves very unpredictably. And when you're in a situation where maybe there are two offensive players around you and you're doing some poaching or flashing, like moving unpredictably is so key, and just kind of constantly going back and forth between the two options for as long as you need to.
yeah. And
And
that was a huge D for us.
yeah, and like Conrad obviously like knows what Mac wants, and I think he just anticipated that really well.
Yeah, for sure.
Second scooper that he's gotten a block on this game, and a couple nice breakthrows there.
Yeah, that was big for us.
All right, let's check out this point here. I think this is going to be another D. Great D from Vinay. This seems like what Pony wants generally.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
like you got a bunch of tall, athletic defenders, and so you really want people to test you deep.
Yeah,
But it's
like
difficult.
that for us to be really good
Yeah.
to work.
I mean, as I found out playing against Pony at National, it's difficult because if you don't test Pony deep, then they're just going to front you and make unders really hard to get.
Yeah,
So it's
and
like you have to throw it deep, but you just have to throw it really well.
yeah, yeah, that is the goal at least.
I do think there's going to be a turnover
Yeah,
here. Yeah, so really good reset D from Revolver. Again, you can see a bunch of players are around the disc right now.
yeah, we sort of just like got a little clogged. They
Yeah,
played really good D.
yeah. And then I think it's going to be a goal in a second. Well, Pony's doing a pretty good job, again, like taking away the first option. I kind of think of end zone D nowadays as like make your opponent complete one more pass because
Yeah,
they want to score in one pass. And if you can turn that into two passes, great. Like if you can just keep pushing the disc backwards, then that's your best shot.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, here is the play that I referenced earlier where it seems like you are, I don't know if this was like an intentional counter by design or Ben just like saw a space and attacked it.
I think he saw that they had sort of a blown coverage.
Yeah.
And that's like where I think it's like, there's a lot of flexibility in that Ben is empowered to do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what our play call was there. I don't think it was that based on the setup, but yeah, I think it's just like Ben sees that they've sort of missed a coverage and that space is open, and he's going to always try to attack in that spot.
Yeah, and this is such an interesting. This is interesting to me because Revolver always has deep help that's going to be in the middle of the field. So if you have, and the players on the sideline are not really going to guard deep because they're relying on that deep help from the middle. So if you send a deep cut down the sideline, maybe that is the key to countering this style of defense. Because that was that Byron? I think so. He's looking to switch. He's just trying to pass off, and then I think this is Dexter is not ready to. He's deeper, but he's not ready to cover that horizontal distance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, I'm imagining there's some sort of blown coverage on the Revolver side. Either they were forcing the wrong way or Dexter didn't realize he was the only deep help.
And maybe that's another disadvantage. Like the more complex your defensive scheme or the farther it is away from person, kind of the more thinking you have to do. And we just said that thinking is bad. So like sometimes the simplest schemes work the best. But again, it's very dependent on the team.
Yeah, definitely some give and take.
Yeah. Okay. Coming down to the wire here. Revolver loves their scoobers. I feel like I rarely see you throw anything other than a forehand backhand.
I think that is correct. I think I will occasionally throw scoobers, but it is few and far between. I think it is much more just like
you have very quick pivots and like a strong low release flat throw, and it's just very consistent. So
yeah, I mean, I think it would be super helpful for me to have a little more aggressive over the top repertoire. But yeah, usually like I'll throw either a flick or a backhand to that inside space. Sometimes a scoober, but yeah, very, very rare.
So last point of the game, spoilers. It seems like Revolver is actually, well, Jason comes down, and it seems like they are tighter on this side after that move. Like, look at Mike; he's really guarding.
Yeah, they do
super
seem to be
tight
more
here. Like they're a lot more scared of that deep cut.
And it's also like it's just a different look. Like I think there are some advantages on defense when it's like they've been playing poachy a lot and then they come down tight person. Like it is a little different.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like a different mentality downfield. So I think, they could also be tied to that a little.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting move. So you from the cutter space, you come all the way back into the handler space.
I would say that's slightly breaking some rules. I don't think that's really like a cut
but that's
prescribing.
That's like fine for you because like you have done really well in the handler set this game, and so
and I think I was sort of like I'm gonna just try to handle a little.
Here we're gonna see the JR cut, and then he gets power position and great throw to Scott there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's kind of a tough throw.
It's definitely a tough throw. That's a small window, and it's a really this type of throw is so dangerous. The end zone huck, you're like 25 yards outside the end zone, 20 to 25, and it's really easy to throw out the back. Really easy to throw too short or out of bounds. and
Yeah.
JR just executes it perfectly.
And Scott, I don't even really think is like at full speed. So it's like but yeah, it's a really well executed throw.
So looking at Jason's D here, specifically how his hips are oriented, what would you do differently in this scenario? Because JR seems to get this move every single time.
Yeah, can you play it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he like overcommits to that like I guess outside up line. Like I mean JR is really hard to guard in a small space like this. I think um I think trying to take away the like outside shoulder a little bit more aggressively and just being like, okay, if you're gonna get it up line, you're gonna get it 1 yard in front of the disc, and my mark is gonna be on you is like sort of the route I would take. If that makes sense. Like be a little more open, maybe even conceding a little of the upline space.
Yeah.
But
So maybe like a bit of a drop step with the left foot here.
yeah, I think that's like how I would
Uh huh.
potentially do
So
it.
you're
I
set up
mean,
a little more sideways to the thrower.
yeah, I mean,
The
there's
big
like a little bit
shuffle.
of like a mental thing that's maybe happening here. Is like Jason might be like, okay, I'm pushing him out, and he thinks JR is going to maybe take that, and then JR does like the opposite. So it's like Jason is jumping in the way that he think, right? Like
Yeah.
he was sort of forcing that way and like being like, it's going to be hard to get through me up line. Um, and so I think he jumps on that move more aggressively than he maybe normally would.
Yeah. I feel like if
And Jared might travel a little there, but it's like he essentially gets into like power position.
yeah.
Whereas like if he's not in power position there, he probably doesn't throw this.
Yeah, he's not really as much of a standstill hooker. Well, sometimes maybe. He definitely
Yeah,
travels.
certainly sometimes. But I just think it's like it makes that throw much more in rhythm
Yeah,
and more approachable.
totally. Yeah, I feel like if I were Jason against JR specifically, I would probably just take a couple steps back towards the
Yeah,
upline
I mean
space.
he's honestly it's like pretty good positioning. He just like overcommits to that
Yeah.
upline in a way because
And
like I don't think Sam is gonna throw that like floaty upline into the middle of the
yeah,
field.
the one that Scott threw earlier, that's probably not going to happen right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but yeah, like I don't know. This is JR's move, and
Exactly. It's just it's hard to guard.
yeah. Um,
And it's like if Jason plays it differently, he probably cuts a little differently. Like there's a lot of
yeah, definitely. Um, so that was the semi. So Pony came into this tournament as the 10 seed, which seems to be pretty normal for Pony. Like you don't perform that well in the regular season relative to how you do at nationals. Whereas at nationals, when's the last time you did not make semis?
last year. We lost in quarters
Oh,
to
right,
win,
right.
but a little bit of a underperformance probably based on our skill at least.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
but yeah, before that, I think we'd made semis every year since 2018.
yeah. And so Pony, consistently one of the best nationals performers. What's your approach for the regular season, and how do you balance attendance with pro and club? It seems like your attendance is not. I mean, consistently like not everyone is there for most of your regular season tournaments, but somehow it always all comes together at nationals, and then you make a deep run.
Yeah, I mean, I think we try to get as much attendance as we can. It's definitely an important thing that we're trying to do. Obviously, we have some flexibility for life things, for UFA stuff, whatever, and we try to work with UFA, like the Empire, to make sure that our practice schedule is around their games, and that our they don't have games on our big tournaments. Like that is a goal. So we try to get as much attendance as we can, but obviously difficult. Yeah, I think we are certainly trying in the regular season. I can tell you that. But it's not a intentional like, oh, we're gonna take it easy in the regular season and then flip a switch for nationals. I think this year specifically, we tried to really implement like a growth mindset. So like we were like, let's try some new stuff and give ourselves the space to actually get better at it. I think in years past we've been like, we have so many good players. We need to be a fully formed team in May or June. And like every practice felt really intense. And there was a lot of frustration if we weren't playing up to the level. And so this year specifically, I think we gave ourselves some room to get better. And that may have led us to underperform a little in the regular season. And then ultimately, I think helped us in at nationals. There's probably some element of just like, we've all been playing a long time, and like ultimately our goal is to win nationals. And so like, as much as we try not to have it impact us, there's like some just like intensity that is hard to reach at any tournament that is not nationals, essentially. Again, not intentional. I just think it is like the nature of having a team that's been together for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's something that commentators said early on in this game. Like one of your coaches maybe was saying it was sometimes a challenge. The team has so much experience. You've been to so many big games at nationals, so like how do you get up for, any random event, practice or tournament during the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a challenge. I think we all are pretty conscious of like the level you need to get to at practices specifically and the reps you need at tournaments where like we understand the importance of it. Um, we're not always perfect at executing, but um, I think, yeah, there it is incredibly valuable to be able to play at that level of intensity throughout a season. I mean, I think that's what makes it hard to repeat. Like there hasn't been a repeat winner. I mean, there's been a new winner in the men's division, I think, since every year since 2016. Um, so it's like there's definitely something challenging about
Yeah, that's remarkable. Even
repeating.
with teams that seem like super teams, like Pony in
Exactly.
2023.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like like I mean, it's cool. It's like the parity is teams are really good. The margins are really small. It's hard to win,
Yeah,
especially when like after you win and everyone's like, oh, okay, this is the best team.
yeah.
We're gonna
But
really give this team the best
I think
shot.
more and more the players that are lesser known are having such a huge impact on the game. Like,
Yeah,
I
for
definitely
sure.
felt like Sokka had a lot of players who no one knew about, and our end result at nationals wasn't good, but every game we played was very winnable. With
Yeah.
like one Team USA player in Trent, and then like a bunch of young college kids pretty much carrying our team against like a lot of players who have been very well known in the ultimate community for a super long time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it just speaks to like how much better Ultimate has been getting, like, um, throughout a roster, right? Like the bottom 10 people on a roster now are like all very skilled and like good frisbee players in a way that I think even when I started playing in like 2014 was not really the case.
Yeah. Um, well, thanks so much for joining this. A long film review, which is great. Felt like we covered a bunch of different topics. Got some great information. Um, is there anything else you want to say about, I don't know, Pony? Any plugs you want to make?
Uh, no, no plugs. Appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to talk frisbee. So appreciate you putting it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining.